This is why it's so important to build up lean muscle as you age, because any time that you can't exercise or you have an injury or something, your organs still need amino acids. Your body's going to live off your existing muscle tissue to fuel the rest of protein synthesis in your body.
I'm excited to do a deep dive into protein, amino acids, really getting into the nitty gritty on this one. And you're an expert in the topic. So I guess from the get-go, first share your background with us. Like, how did you become interested in this topic and gain your expertise in all the many areas that we're going to talk about?
I think it really starts with being basically born into a family where it was important. My parents were in the supplement business in the 70s, and then they had a natural health food store, a natural health food restaurant in the early 80s. So I was born into that in 1984, and they were also vegetarian/pescatarians. We ate fish about once a week. So I was raised very much on consuming dietary supplements, on also thinking a lot about protein and thinking about complete proteins and a complete amino acid profile on what we ate. Because I think if you want to pursue a vegetarian or especially a plant-based diet, you need to think a lot about it because it takes a little bit more work. So our family thought about that and they took that seriously. I think on top of that, my family was really interested in fitness. And so they exercised a lot. My mom was a master swimmer. And so some of my earliest memories of her are actually her giving me amino acids and being like, look, Angie, try these amino acids. Aren't they amazing? Can't you feel them? After her swim workout, I would always go to the gym with her. And afterwards she would take them and you should give them to me too. So, it's kind of, I guess in the end, I ended up just building the thing that my mom loved.
Yeah, I can totally relate.
But, apart from that, I think, later in my life, I was kind of immersed in that. I think anyone who grows up in an environment where your parents have certain values and certain standards and they're really into that, it becomes part of you. At the same time, in adolescence, you probably push away and try to do other things. And so as I got older, I pushed away. I tried other things. I got into a lot of trouble. I had some pretty significant physical experiences. I had a near-death experience where I got stabbed multiple times and almost beaten to death. Yikes. And so coming out of that, there was a significant physical and mental and emotional development, project and healing that I went through. And in that, I think nutrition and wellness took on a whole new meaning for me. That was when I was 16. So kind of 16 through 22, it became really I guess it was always personal, but it became my journey, not my parents' health journey that they gave to me, but mine, So I started researching nutrition and researching mental health and spiritual health practices. It just became my passion because I was, coming back from this near-death experience.
What happened? Was it just a rogue assault, or were you bullied, or what was the deal?
No, so growing up, I was I never got into a fight in my life, but I took way too much LSD when I was 16.
Wow.
I was in the wrong neighborhood and I provoked a fight, and they clearly were more serious about fighting than I was. And so I got stabbed twice in the back. My spleen got barely nicked, but I had to have full abdominal surgery. So I have a huge scar down my abdomen, and then I got stabbed in the knee and my patella tendon got severed in half. So my patella tendon had to get reattached. And then I was just beaten, totally black and blue.
Wow.
So yeah, it was, I guess people, talk about ego deaths or plant medicine journeys and all that. So at 16, I was immersed pretty deeply in, whatever that stuff is people do on purpose now.
Well, man, I'm grateful that you survived. Holy cow. That's insane adversity that I can't even put words to, but glad you made it here, all this way to be on the Genius Life podcast.
Well, and so I mean, coming out of that too, I don't want to go on too much about my past, but coming out of that, I pursued a career exploring lots of different things, and I wound up back again founding a supplement company in 2017. And amino acids were one of the things that have been nearest and dearest to my heart for my whole life. And so they were, obviously a fundamental part of one of the products we chose to launch with.
Love it. Well, I want to talk about amino acids, but I guess before we get there, let's start with protein, right? What is protein? Why is it so important? And where does it like exist in the food supply? What role does it play in our body? Let's start there.
Great. Yeah. So even before we talk about nutrition, protein is really the building block of life. So when we talk about living organisms, proteins are the things that play this really crucial role. And anytime we talk about DNA and mRNA, et cetera. So it is the crucial building block of life. In terms of what it means though for us, in terms of our diet and how it supports us, there are three major macronutrients that we typically think of. And those are carbohydrates, fat, and protein. You could count alcohol if you want as well, but it's devoid of much meaning other than as a depressant. Right. So protein is very distinct from carbohydrates and from fat as a food source that we take in. And that's because carbohydrates and fat, their primary role is to help us produce physical energy in the body through ATP. So they actually are they're the kind of like the raw fuel source that's most frequently burned to give our body physical energy to move. The thing that's very different about proteins is that they're actually built of and contain amino acids. And amino acids, when we digest protein and we break down the amino acids, they then fuel the development of new proteins in our body. And all proteins in our body are constantly in a state of being broken down and then resynthesizing. And in the event of them breaking down and the resynthesizing, some of the amino acids are lost. And that's why you need to eat protein to get those new amino acids to rebuild proteins. And those proteins in the body but they make up many parts of our body. I think most commonly people think of muscle, but they also make up all of our organs. So our heart, our kidneys, our skin, et cetera. They also are the enzymes. When we talk about enzymes in our body, it's proteins. When we talk about neurotransmitters in our brain, oftentimes those are amino acids, or the precursors of them are amino acids, which all come from proteins. So proteins are a big deal, and we need to be consuming them because I think arguably you could say that protein is the one macronutrient that you really will die without. You could cut out the others, and you could basically survive on protein. I wouldn't recommend that, and that's not like an optimal, living situation. But you need to eat these proteins because they are then the building blocks of new proteins in your body.
Fascinating. Yeah, I mean, on a total volume basis, well, for one, there's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate, right? The fats that we need, the essential fats that I'm aware of are the omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, right? And we have a very small total volume requirement for those, right? It's just a couple grams, if that, per day. But we need a massive amount of protein on a daily basis. Is that accurate?
We do. And I would
relative to fat.
Yes, that is correct. And I would say that this is one of the things that's maybe most misunderstood about protein and how important it is. And one of the, I think in the last few years, the debates around carbohydrates and fat have largely ignored the crucial role that protein plays. And oftentimes when people choose to have kind of a more fat-centric or ketogenic diet, they naturally get lots of protein. If you're eating a lot of, steak, you're getting protein at the same time. If you're eating cheeses, you're getting protein at the same time. But typically, it really depends on what your level of activity is, what your age is, et cetera. But I think a safe guideline is somewhere between 0.75 and 1 gram of protein per day per pound of body weight. And that's safe to say because if you're growing and you're younger, you need more protein, you need more amino acids because you're synthesizing more proteins. If you are older, so basically at the age of 40 and then beyond, it gets even worse. Sarcopenia gets worse, where you continue to break down the proteins in your body, but you need more proteins to rebuild them, and your body is not as receptive to the signaling factors that then stimulate the muscle protein synthesis. So you need to eat even more protein than you normally would. If you're an active adult and you're moving around a lot, then you need even more protein. So a good general rule is to think about 0.75 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. And that's a lot. That ends up being about, if you're thinking in terms of calories, about 30% of your calories or more.
Wow. Fascinating. And what are the best, you grew up in a largely pescatarian house. What are the best sources of protein to get? The most concentrated, the most bioavailable, the most digestible? Where do those lie in the food supply?
Very good question. It's not plants, which is what I was raised on. So I learned that as I came to study it more, and actually my family studied it more. We all moved more to a animal protein-based diet, and the reason for that is because when you eat a whole food protein, that whole food protein is composed of about 20 amino acids. There are many more amino acids in nature. There's like 300 amino acids in nature, and there's even more amino acids that you can consume through food. For example, creatine is an amino acid that is not one of those 20 dietary amino acid proteins.
Fascinating.
And sorry?
Fascinating.
Yeah. And so of those 20, there are 9 that are essential. You brought up, essential fats earlier. And those 9 essential amino acids are considered essential because your body is not able to synthesize them. It can't create them on its own. Plants are actually the ones that are able to synthesize these essential amino acids, and then other animals eat them, and then those essential amino acids become part of their own tissue, and then when we eat them, we're able to get those essential amino acids. For example, that's how you end up getting it from eating another animal. So what you want to try to get in a protein source is a protein source that includes all 9 essential amino acids, ideally in the most ideal proportions, which we can go a little bit more into detail in if that's interesting. But on top of that, you're really trying to find them to where they're also where you're able to digest the main food source and get those amino acids. So plants are more difficult to digest and get the amino acids from them. So there's a whole scoring system called the protein digestibility adjusted scoring system. I think that's what it's called. I forget exactly. It's like I can give you the link afterwards.
Oh, it's a crazy acronym. It's like PDAAS, and then there's the DIAAS, and yeah, it took that. I had to sit down and like actively like flashcard myself to memorize those. They're very they're a mouthful.
Yeah. And so basically what they analyze is when you eat, say a piece of protein, whether it's plant or animal, how much of the amino acids are you actually able to get from it? And so one comparison between plants and animals is that animals are more easy to get the actual amino acids out of the protein. And another factor is that animal protein contains all 9 essential amino acids, whereas most plants do not. There's a few that do: buckwheat, quinoa, soy. So if you choose to eat a plant-based diet, you want to be very thoughtful about how you combine different plant sources at the same time to eat all 9 essential amino acids at once. So
I've heard that plant sources actually, they all contain the 9 essentials, but in just very widely varying amounts. Is that accurate?
I don't believe that's accurate, but I'm willing to be challenged on that and to look into it more afterwards. But I don't believe that's the case, that they contain all 9.
Okay, so we know that people on plant-based diets, this is well-known guidance. There's well-known guidance for them to mix and match proteins accordingly, because you can't get all of your needs from one protein, whether or not they contain, 0 of certain amino acids or just very, very small amounts. We know that that the 9 essential amino acids are more concentrated in animal products, and they're more digestible. Is that true?
That's a quick summary. Yes.
Yeah. Love that.
Just to go back and I guess highlight, though, you absolutely can get all 9 essential amino acids and have a healthy protein diet from consuming plants.
Yeah, because you mentioned that it's not optimal to get them from plants, but then the animals get them from plants. So where's that sort of break in the chain? Is it because they don't contain all of the appropriate concentrations of the essential amino acids? Is that more or less it?
That's a great question. And I am not as familiar with muscle protein synthesis in animals and their exact needs for the right proportions of the essential amino acids. I assume it has something exactly to do with that, or things that relate to their specific digestive tract in specific animals and why they're able to digest certain types of plant proteins more effectively than we can, and maybe they combine them. The simple answer is I assume, again, I'm not an expert in livestock, but I assume it comes from their ability to digest those certain amino acids. Oh, sorry, this was the other point I was thinking of. So when we try to eat our ideal proportion of essential amino acids in a diet for us, one of the first things that we look at, and and that the studies have looked at to try to find, hey, what's the best combination of essential amino acids for us, is you actually start by looking at the composition and the proportion of essential amino acids in human muscular tissue. And that's where you start. And so that's a thought that perhaps the composition of them in certain types of animals and however the whole food chain progresses, that the lower down animals, perhaps we're not eating those animals, but the animals we're eating are eating them, perhaps have different compositions of their their skeletal muscle tissue that's different than ours. But again, I'm like definitely in hypothesis zone here because I've not studied, muscle protein synthesis specifically in livestock or animals.
No, but that's totally fine. Like we are red meat, right? So it would make perfect sense that when we ingest red meat or the skeletal muscle of other animals, that we are supplying our muscles with exactly the appropriate ratio of essential amino acids that they need to flourish. Makes perfect sense. Okay, so when it comes to sources of protein, are all animal sources of protein equal? For example, red meat, chicken, fish. I've actually heard that fish tends to be less concentrated in protein or something like that. I don't know. Maybe you can speak to that. And also the difference between the amino acids that we get when eating skeletal muscle and like collagen, for example. Collagen is a big topic these days. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'm going to break apart collagen as a separate issue because it's actually, it's taking one part of tissue from an animal. Oftentimes, if that's the type of collagen that you're consuming, and that's kind of different than comparing the animals relative to each other. So the animals overall relative to each other are different types of dietary proteins like egg, chicken, steak, fish. It is accurate that they contain different amounts of amino acids per gram. And so thus, that's one way of thinking about it. If you're trying to manage the total amount of daily energy that you consume through the form of food sources that you would measure through kilocalories, then you would think about, well, if I'm trying to optimize for getting the most amount of protein with the least amount of calories, then inherently there are some food sources that are more dense. For example, when you take a whey protein isolate, it's super dense only in the protein, and it's basically fats and carbs have been stripped out of it, versus something like a really fatty piece of steak. It has many more calories for the actual total amount of protein that you're getting from it. On top of that, yes, different types of animal tissue have different proportions of essential amino acids. So there are some that are more effective than others. At the same time as that, there's also different amounts of digestibility of those protein sources. So there's many layers to this that are all occurring at the same time. Now, separate from that, collagen is not actually, so when we're talking about eating meat, right, you're talking about actually eating the muscle of an animal. When we're eating the collagen of another animal, we're eating a different part of their body. And that part of the body is made up of very different proportions. So when you take a collagen supplement, it does not include, typically, unless it's been added to it, it does not include all 9 essential amino acids, but it's exceptionally high in some non-essential amino acids like hydroxyproline, proline, glycine, which are awesome because they're super helpful with kind of getting around the process of your body having to transform essential amino acids into those non-essential amino acids in your own body. And they directly can support with things like building joints, improving skin health, improving hair, et cetera, because those are the non-essential amino acids that are very active and prevalent in that type of tissue.
Love it. So I take it you're a fan of collagen.
I am a fan of collagen. For me personally, it's not a super high priority because I don't have major joint issues, and I'm not to the age yet where I'm like, super interested in like trying to optimize my skin and my hair. So I'm not a huge collagen taker, but I imagine that as I age, it will become more important to me.
Yeah, love
especially that. Especially if I want to like, age physically the way that I appear better.
Of course. Yeah. Would you, if you were to supplement with collagen, would you count that towards the protein requirements that you talked about earlier?
No.
Interesting.
And the reason why I would not count them towards the protein requirements that I talked about earlier, except in the case where I was combining collagen with other protein sources to hit those requirements, is because what we have determined through multiple studies is that the active component of protein that stimulates muscle protein synthesis are the 9 essential amino acids. So we've done studies where you have a formula of only the 9 essential amino acids, a formula that includes the 9 essential amino acids plus the other 11 dietary amino acids, basically in the exact proportions of, say, steak, and then another with only the 11 non-essential amino acids. And the essential amino acids in that situation create the exact same amount of muscle protein synthesis as the combination of essential and non-essential, and the non-essential create no muscle protein synthesis. So what we're able to determine from that is that when we consume any type of protein, it is the essential amino acids that are the active component. So if you're consuming collagen and you don't have all 9 essential amino acids, if the reason why you're consuming the protein is to help rebuild new proteins in your body optimally, like you would if you eat a piece of chicken or you eat an ideal combination of plant proteins, it is not performing that same function.
That makes perfect sense. So non-essential amino acids play no role that we can see, at least, in muscle protein synthesis. It's really about these essential aminos.
Yeah, so they play an important role in the final protein. So if you think about it this way, the amino acids can play multiple roles in the body. One is they can play like a chemical signaling role. So for example, they can actually be the thing that produces new neurotransmitters, or they could be, in the case of leucine is one of the essential amino acids, and it is the amino acid that initially kind of kickstarts the process of muscle protein synthesis. It's a thing that says, let's go. It activates the mTOR pathway. After that, leucine, as one of the 9 essential amino acids, also plays this role of being part of muscle protein synthesis. You need all 9 of them at that time. And when they're all interacting together, then they create the process of muscle protein synthesis. Then those 9 essential amino acids pull in non-essential amino acids to build up new protein in the body. So there's kind of 3 different steps. One is, what's the signaling factor that actually kicks off the process? What's actually involved in the process itself? And then what is an additional material that gets used in building the final protein? And the non-essential amino acids are part of the that's why they're part of the kind of the 20 dietary amino acids, and they're actually part of our final muscle tissue. They're part of final protein. But we don't have studies in humans, but we do have studies in livestock. This is not something I'm super familiar with, but I know these basic figures that because they've done it's a business, right? It's a business to grow animals. They do very strategic amino acid profiling and feed livestock amino acids to optimize how they grow them. And they've been able to determine that basically 20% of the diet from like massive livestock farms would ideally come from non-essential amino acids. Only 20%, whereas the other 80% would be ideal. When we consume a whole food animal protein, about half of it is non-essential amino acids. And so we're rather confident that maybe it's not as extreme as the 20%, but we're rather confident that we don't need that many non-essential amino acids all at one time. The simple point, though, is that if you want to eat whole foods, that's the best source that exists. So when you eat, you're trying to eat a good whole food protein, the best combination is about 50-50, 50 essential amino acids, 50 non-essential amino acids. But in some cases where, here's another part of how the non-essential amino acids get included into new protein. As I said earlier, our protein is constantly breaking down and then rebuilding itself. And when it breaks down, those 20 amino acids that were in the muscle tissue are suddenly in our blood.
Wow.
Right. And they become, in the cell, and they become available to be reformulated into new protein. Some, though, are excreted at that point. They're not able to be reused. They're not good anymore, basically. And so that's why you need to be eating more new amino acids to supplement that. And what we have found is that when they do long-term studies, so they did a study actually for NASA where they put people at bed rest for 28 days. So they literally went to the bathroom in their bed. They were not able to move at all. And they tried to do different types of nutritional supplementation to see how they could maintain muscle mass with them without any movement. Because obviously, if you're in outer space and you don't have any resistance training, you start to lose muscle mass very quickly. Anyone who's had a surgery, when I got stabbed, I lost all my muscle mass within a week.
Wow.
So they fed these participants 15 grams of essential amino acids with no non-essential amino acids, and some carbohydrates 6 times a day. They did 15 grams 6 times a day. At the end of 28 days, there was net muscle gain. Not only was there not muscle loss, there was net muscle gain. There was a significant muscle strength loss, like they couldn't move the muscles. They weren't as strong as they used to be, but they didn't actually lose muscle tissue. And that is another example of how when the existing muscle breaks down, if we're consuming enough essential amino acids, it can reuse some of the non-essential amino acids that are just coming from the existing muscle tissue to rebuild and to create new muscle. Also, some portion of the essential amino acids that we consume can be resynthesized into non-essential amino acids by the liver. So in short, I know I just said like a bunch of sciencey stuff. In short, non-essential amino acids do form part of your actual muscle in the end, and they form part of proteins in your body, but they can be reused from existing proteins that get broken down, and essential amino acids that you consume can be turned into the non-essential amino acids. So they are important, but they are important. And I would encourage people to eat whole food diets with non-essential amino acids, but they're way less important in this whole process than essential amino acids.
So you said when you eat whole food protein from like an animal source, it's about 50% essential amino acids and 50% non-essential amino acids.
Mm-hmm.
Did I?
Yeah.
So could you then say that eating 10 grams of essential amino acids is equivalent to eating 20 grams of whole food protein? Like you're getting a more concentrated source of these. It's like the equivalent, right? Because 20 grams of if 20 grams of like steak of protein from steak, about half of that are non-essential amino acids, and you're getting 10 grams of essential amino acids. You could basically just eat 10 grams of essential amino acids.
In terms of muscle protein synthesis, so for the synthesis of new proteins, it's even better. It's 3 times.
Wow.
So gram for gram, it is correct that if I take 10 grams of an essential amino acid supplement with similar proportions to the essential amino acid composition of steak, gram for gram, there's twice as many in the essential amino acid supplement.
Right.
And so inherently that doubles the muscle protein synthesis. But because essential amino acids in a dietary supplement don't have to be digested to the same degree that the whole food protein does, and immediately enters the blood plasma, it's been demonstrated to be at least 3 times the rate of muscle protein synthesis.
Wow.
So that's not to say that it's the same thing as the protein, or it's always going to be, it's like equivalent or the exact same. But in terms of muscle protein synthesis, it has 3 times the impact. That's
fascinating. And you guys, so Keon, great company. You guys make essential amino acids, obviously. How does an essential amino acid supplement compare to like a BCAA, branch chain amino acid supplement? First of all, I guess what are BCAAs, and how does like an essential amino acid supplement compare to a BCAA supplement?
Branch chain amino acids are 3 of the essential amino acids. So branch chain amino acids are part of this essential amino acid bucket. They're 3 of the 9, and they include leucine, isoleucine, and valine. And the reason why they're called branch chain is just the formation of the way that the molecules actually look.
Got it.
And these 3 are really important for muscle protein synthesis. As I said earlier, leucine is the one that is the signaling factor that stimulates it. It's the thing that like makes muscle protein synthesis happen. And if you don't have the other 2, then it can't continue the process. You ultimately then need the other 6 as well. You need all 9. So they're really important. And there were actually studies many decades ago that specifically studied BCAAs, these 3 amino acids, and their ability to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. And so the kind of supplement industry for a long time thought that they were great, and they alone, just those 3, consuming those would give the benefits that I was just describing, for example, to essential amino acids. What they discovered over longer term and over more studies is that BCAAs alone actually do not. They have no effect on muscle protein synthesis if not consumed with the other 6.
Wow.
So you could potentially combine a BCAA supplement with other types of whole food protein and get some benefit from the BCAAs. But if you consume them on their own, they provide no effect to potentially a negative effect, in that they will stress the body to want to stimulate muscle protein synthesis, but you don't have the other 6 amino acids. And so it breaks down existing muscle tissue and pulls the amino acids out of that to stimulate new muscle protein synthesis. So it's at best nothing, at worst bad. That said, they alone, those 3 aren't bad. You just want to make sure that you eat them or you take them as part of a complete essential amino acid formula.
Is there any reason to take them? I mean, if you have the choice between BCAAs and essential amino acids, is there any?
I would not take them. I mean, I think it's pretty conclusive over the last 15 years of research that there's not a good reason to take them. So, well, I'll make one last potential argument for them, and this is like, but it's more hypothetical. And I still wouldn't recommend them, simply because of the risk of taking them in isolation. So there's something called the central fatigue hypothesis, that when you are exercising, particularly for a long period of time, and you're doing some type of like endurance exercise, you oxidize leucine, which means like you basically burn leucine at 3 times the rate that you normally burn it. Wow. And in that situation, what happens is the amino acids, this is actually a slight sidestep, but I think it's really interesting. You're trying to maintain a constant rate of amino acids in the right proportion in your blood all the time. Your body is trying to do that. And whenever there's an event that's not happening, then it breaks down existing muscle tissue and tries to refuel, to even out your blood.
Wow.
And basically your muscles end up being the reservoir of amino acids for your whole body. And this, just a little hint to the future, this is why it's so important to build up lean muscle as you age. Because any time that you can't exercise or you have an injury or something, your organs still need amino acids, and it's basically your body's going to live off your existing muscle tissue to fuel the rest of protein synthesis in your body. So going back though, when you oxidize all this leucine, temporarily what happens is there is all the amino acids, they're all in the blood, right, at these ideal proportions. But what happens is certain amino acids share similar pathways, and particularly certain pathways in the brain, because your brain has a blood-brain barrier. And tryptophan and leucine happen to share that same pathway. So when you decrease the amount of leucine, it increases the amount of tryptophan relative to leucine in your blood. We do know that. We've measured that. And we believe that then what happens is more tryptophan gets into your brain. And tryptophan is a precursor of serotonin. And serotonin is a neurotransmitter that makes you feel more soft and sleepy and potentially tired. And so we believe that the bonking effect that many endurance athletes have is not just from running out of carbs or trying to transition from using carbs to fat as their primary fuel source, but it's actually an increased amount of serotonin in the brain because there's more tryptophan suddenly getting in your brain. So like maybe you could argue that in really intense exercise, just supplementing with BCAAs at some just right, accurate proportion, or maybe just leucine at some accurate proportion could potentially offset that kind of central fatigue situation. But I would just much more safely and wisely choose to take a complete essential amino acid complex, because your body then is going to be able to optimize that in the blood. It's going to be able to keep this kind of consistent level in the blood, and all the other benefits of taking essential amino acids in an endurance exercise situation, because your muscles are getting really tired in that situation. And when you take essential amino acids in a complete complex, it helps prevent muscle breakdown, and thus you feel more, it improves muscular endurance and muscular stamina. So it's like, why risk only taking that? But that's like that's my best shot at trying to make some reason of why you would take it.
No, that's fascinating, because I've never thought about that within the context of physical performance, but there are tryptophan depletion studies where they use branched chain amino acid supplements to essentially deplete the brain of serotonin to see what happens neurobiologically, like as a result. And so it's really interesting. I've never thought about like what the potential consequences of that would be for performance, which it sounds like it's actually a positive thing to kind of lower the amount of serotonin that is accessible to the brain during acute bouts of physical activity.
Yeah, because in that case, the tryptophan and the serotonin makes you tired.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be tired. You want to keep going.
Exactly. Wow. Very interesting. Okay. So when it comes to protein supplementation, I'm a big fan of whey protein. You guys make a great whey protein, by the way. Love the flavor. Love that you guys have like a little bit of that. You put a little bit of salt in the vanilla flavored whey protein, because whenever you have sweet, you got to have salt, and it makes the taste pop. So
it really makes it pop. I think especially if you choose to sweeten with something like stevia, it really makes it have a super smooth taste.
Yeah, love that. Yeah. Whey protein versus, I guess, plant protein. You obviously make a whey protein, right? So disclosure is out there. But but if you can set aside, the fact that you guys make a whey protein, like how would you compare the two, right? They're both. I feel like people love to use both. Both are fairly ubiquitous on the market these days, with lots of sort of corporate vested interest in the promotion of both. So what's your stance?
So we chose to make a whey protein isolate, and have not yet chosen, and I don't foresee us choosing to make a plant-based protein for the following reasons. When you start to make a protein powder, the point of the protein powder is to help people supplement their diet with more protein. And typically what they want to do is they want to supplement their diet with more protein and not introduce a bunch of other stuff, right? Like, I'm just trying to get protein in my diet, And if you look at whey protein isolate, it is remarkably high in protein per gram. Through the process of the isolate process, because you can have whey protein concentrate or whey protein isolate. Isolate is just one further step of a filtration process that removes carbs and removes virtually all lactose. You end up with a final product that gram for gram, other than this other thing called whey protein hydrolysate, which is this like super process thing, you basically end up with a natural, whole food, awesome source of protein that is basically not an allergen to virtually anyone, unless you have like some type of really remarkable dairy allergy. But like, I'm sensitive to lactose, and I can very easily consume a whey protein isolate with the lowest amount of calories per gram and not a bunch of other stuff. If you look at the ingredient panel on the Keon Clean Protein, it's protein, organic natural flavor, stevia, and salt, pink Himalayan salt. Like, that's it. If you look at the back of a plant protein, you're going to see that they have to combine multiple types of protein, like sources, because one plant protein will not have all the essential amino acids.
Right.
And they typically have a bunch of other stuff in it to try to help you digest it, to try to help it make it taste better, etc. And my main concern is that I tend to be, from a whole food diet perspective, I just try to be like pretty minimalist.
Yeah.
And think about what I'm eating and like how concentrated it has to be. When you think about the amount of total peas and rice that have to be concentrated to get that amount of protein, it is a lot of peas and rice, like way more than it is milk that gets you to a whey protein isolate. And in the course of that, you're taking things that are growing out of the ground. And naturally in the ground, there are lots of heavy metals. And thus, when you concentrate something that much growing out, you're taking this huge amount of thing, you're concentrating it. For me, you're ending up with something that has a lot more calories, a lot more added other stuff in it I don't want, not as digestible of a protein, and the potential for a lot of extra like metals and toxins. It just seems like not worth it. Whereas if someone's really committed to a plant-based diet, we do offer Keon aminos, which are the ideal formulation of essential amino acids that come from the fermentation of plants to derive those amino acids. So it's 100% vegan in proportions that are in some ways even better than meat. And like I would just take those. So any of my friends that are vegan, I'm like, you should just take aminos. It doesn't have to be ours, but some form of a really well formulated essential amino acid complex that comes from plants. I
didn't realize that they were vegan. That's fascinating. Are Keon essential aminos, is it protein, or are they just like free form aminos that your body doesn't even have to break down?
They are free form aminos.
Wow.
Yeah.
Super cool. And when is like the appropriate time and dose to take them?
So I think this kind of goes to both in terms of like what's the most ideal way to eat protein, and what your goals are. So the way that muscle protein synthesis works. So if you're just trying to like basically nurture all the proteins in your body, every time that you consume protein, it basically kicks off a process that lasts about 3 hours.
Okay.
And so taking them any more frequently than every 3 hours, it's not going to add to the, it's like eating protein any more than every 3 hours is not going to add any benefit to the muscle or the amino acids in your body. They're just going to get converted into glucose. So the way that I would encourage someone to use them is if you're really trying to like be super optimal, right? I mean, you would try to consume some form of amino acids like every 3 hours that you're awake. But obviously it's become much more interesting to people to do intermittent fasting, to restrict the time eating window. And this is an ideal way to consume essential amino acids because not only is it not helpful to consume protein more than every 3 hours, if you go more than 3 hours, like once you go into the fourth hour of not consuming amino acids in the form of protein or a supplement, you go into net muscle protein loss. You are losing muscle. So ideally, I think if you like to fast in the morning, first thing in the morning, take essential amino acids, and then 3 hours later, and then maybe have lunch. And then if you could have them, again, like kind of during like a snack time period in the afternoon, you start to get hungry or distracted, or you're looking for an extra boost of energy. That's another great time. So I think finding those spots in the day when you're not eating is an optimal time to take it because it's going to ensure that you get one more muscle protein synthesis spike in the day to nurture the muscle and the proteins in your body. Another great time to take them is before and after exercise. And that's because when you exercise, you stimulate even more muscle protein breakdown, and thus your body's need for more amino acids becomes that much more significant. And if you supplement with them before and after exercise, before it'll give you energy while you exercise, more stamina, and it will support muscle protein synthesis. If you take them after, it will really support with recovery time. It will reduce the amount of soreness that you have, and it will enhance the amount of new muscle that is built.
Love that. With regard to a dose, I feel like we've had a handful of people on the podcast talk about a leucine threshold. Like you want to get 2.5 grams, 2,500 milligrams of leucine per bolus. Is that something that you would attest to? And is that all? Does that also happen to be the case with essential amino acids?
No. So the basic science on this, and there's several studies I can send you afterwards about this, is that at about 3 grams of a total essential amino acid complex is when you get to see the stimulation of muscle protein synthesis. At about 3 grams is kind of the minimum effective dose. Of that 3 grams, you want approximately 35 to 40% to be leucine. So that's less than 2,500 milligrams, right? That said, you linearly, in a linear fashion, I'm not going to try to say the adverb of that, in a linear fashion, it gets better. And you stimulate even more muscle protein synthesis up to 15 grams of essential amino acids, where 40% is leucine. And there's other specific percentages around what the other amino acids should be. After the 15 grams, you don't really get that much more benefit.
Interesting.
So really, it's in the 3 to 15 grams. Now, naturally, there's different sizes of people, different sizes of existing muscle mass, different weight, gender, but over several studies, that's the basic conclusion.
I've been doing, because I have my Kion aminos, and I've been doing I thought that I needed to be doing 2 scoops to hit 2.5 gram. I think I'm getting like 4 grams of leucine or something like that. But you're saying like 1 scoop in the morning is...
Well, I mean, I think it's all kind of like budget and optimization. I take 2 to 3 scoops.
2 to 3
And that's
scoops.
because at 3 scoops, at 15 grams, I'm hitting the maximum benefit I'm going to get.
Got it.
So yeah, if you take 3 scoops, you will get maximum benefit.
Maximum benefit.
2 scoops is good, and just one scoop is great. At least at 1 scoop, you're not going to be like in net muscle protein loss over the next couple hours while you're fasting or while you're exercising, whatever you're doing.
Perfect. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Going back to whey protein, is there sort of an essential or optimal rather dosing schedule for whey protein, or is whey protein something that you can take any time of day? Because I've always thought that I've always heard that whey protein is so rapidly absorbed that it really is best suited for the post-workout setting. Is it something that you could also that's sort of optimized to be taken in the middle of the day, sort of in that in between meal period?
I would think about it in terms of timing. I would think about it very similar to essential amino acids. So when you compare these different forms of amino acids, whether that's EAAs, whey protein, or like a casein, which is another form of milk protein that has a slower release. It has the slowest release compared to the other two. Some people try to take casein, right, like at night, so it releases a longer muscle protein synthesis over the duration of the evening. But they've actually done studies where they do these doses of the whey protein versus the casein on these like timed intervals, and it ends up being the whey protein does even better.
Oh, wow.
So I think it's like, I mean, I'm
maybe
sure
because
there's
of the amino acid ratios, like maybe whey just has more leucine or more BCAAs in it.
Yeah, it's like I'm not sure the exact reason why, but I'm sure you could pull out some study where instead you do the casein and it does this thing instead. But I think overall, what I would say is that I would like if you ate 2 hours ago, I'd wait an hour until you do it, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think in terms of timing, whether it's before or after exercise or at a different time of day. It's across the board, it's beneficial. And when they do these cross studies versus casein, it's not like there's enough study that actually shows that the whey protein is even better if taken the multiple times throughout the day. That said, I think another part of your question is maybe how much. And ideally, if you think about your daily protein intake, I would try to divide it by 5 or 6. And take those doses of protein throughout the day, right? That said, eating 5 to 6 times a day, like definitely goes against people who are trying to do intermittent fasting, goes against kind of, I think people who don't always want to be in a stage of digestion. And again, this is not for like, that's not the answer for like every single health solution.
Right.
That is the answer for if you're trying to optimize muscle protein synthesis.
Yeah, if you're trying to get swole or at least maintain and fight off.
Yeah. I mean, even lean, because I think that's the one thing. Like sometimes this scares, I know, like people who are endurance athletes, or sometimes I just hear it from women, honestly. Like they're scared. Like, oh, is this going to make me like all bulky? Like it's not going to make you bulky. Like, building muscle and this type of muscle is not going to make you like all swollen and bulky. It's going to give you a toner, leaner body. It's going to assure that when you're burning calories, you're focused on burning fat calories and not eating away at your muscle stores. So
hear that, ladies? That's super important.
It's super important. And this is like one of the biggest issues, actually. When people oftentimes go on diets, they just cut calories, right? Or they do something kind of like radical all of a sudden. And when you cut a bunch of calories, and if you don't have enough protein in your diet when you're doing that, you are going to lose muscle as well as fat. And muscle, like a pound of muscle, it's about 750 kcal versus like 3,500 kcal on a pound of fat. So your body actually will prioritize in some cases burning the muscle first. And so if you go through a bunch of these yo-yo diets, you lose a bunch of weight, but you lose muscle in that period. And then you go back to kind of the not ideal eating habits and you put on more weight. And through that process, you end up losing muscle over the years and you end up with a softer, because people aren't just trying to lose weight, right? They're trying to like be vibrant, active, have muscle to perform certain types of activities, and I think, superficially, not in a bad way, but literally in the way we perceive our bodies, like feel toned and like I don't have a bunch of, extra fat. And cutting out protein is a big risk in that process of trying to restrict the amount of calories or eating that you do on a daily basis. So going back to like, how should you eat the whey protein? Ideally, you try to consume protein to amino acids. You take whatever your daily count is. If I'm trying to get, 150 grams of protein in today, divide it by 5 and get about 30 grams of protein at a time. That said, this is like ideal. If you can't do that, you can get in, 4 doses of it or 3, 3 amounts of that, great, do the 3 amounts. But this is one time in which something like a dietary essential amino acid supplement is so helpful. And this is how I use Keon Aminos is, I'm a bigger, more muscular guy. I weigh like 200 pounds. I'm trying to get 200 grams.
You weigh 200 pounds? It's hard to tell from this vantage point, but
yeah. I mean, I'm like a thicker, more muscular type build guy. And so, to get in that amount of protein on a daily basis, that's a lot of protein. That said, I know if I take, 10 grams of essential amino acids of Keon Aminos, it's not exactly equivalent, but for my goals of muscle protein synthesis, it's equivalent to 30 grams of protein.
Wow. So
I don't have to take, I don't actually, consume 200 grams of whole food protein a day. I consume maybe 140. And then the last 60 are coming from, 30 grams of essential amino acids. And that can come first thing in the morning and then after a workout. And, maybe later in the day, instead of trying to have, some kind of snack or something.
Yeah. Love that. I personally am not, I'm not into the whole like eating a huge bolus of protein every 3 hours. I like to eat a big meal to break my fast. Maybe I'll have a protein shake midday, along with some whole fruit. My snacks tend to be, I tend to snack once or twice in the middle of the day, like really small snacks. Maybe it's like a high protein snack or whole fruit or whatever, protein shake. And then I have a big meal for dinner. So yeah, I like the idea of sort of like aggregating my protein, but I guess that's not necessarily optimal for maximizing muscle protein synthesis if you want to be dosing your protein every 3 hours. But it's something that works for me. And I guess I'm one of those people that I don't like to feel like I'm just like digesting constantly throughout the day.
That's how I am. I really only like to eat twice a day. So I take Keon Aminos when I wake up in the morning, and then I go on a walk or go on exercise. A couple hours later, I have more, it ends up being about 3 hours later. Then I have a lunch. And then I either maybe take it in the afternoon or I have like whey protein, and then I have a big dinner. And I like to sit down with my family and like have a big dinner. And honestly, eating my biggest meal at night is not the most optimal idea probably for health, but for physical health, but for like my emotional health and enjoying my family, like that's, I like to eat that then. And I save my carbs for then because I like to eat carbs.
Yeah.
But if I eat them in the middle of the day, I get tired, and I eat them at night. It's great. It makes me tired and I sleep well.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let's talk a little bit about some common myths regarding protein. For one, that there's a cap on how much protein you can absorb per meal. Is there any merit to that? Some people say you can only absorb like 20, 30 grams of protein per meal, something like that. I don't know. I've heard that echoed within the sort of wellness community. Is there any merit to that?
Kind of, a little bit. So it's not so much about how much protein you can digest per meal. It's how much protein is going to be used in muscle protein synthesis to build new protein. You will still digest it and use it, but it'll be turned into glucose to be used as a source for ATP or to be stored as fat. So there is like, you could, you could eat like a ton, you could eat only protein for your meal, right? That's way beyond a certain amount of that your body's actually going to be able to use for muscle protein synthesis. And it will just use the remaining amount to actually fuel your body and support the ATP process.
Got it. What about the whole like protein being bad for the kidneys? This has
been pretty debunked that if you have kidney disease, it can create issues for you. If you do not have kidney disease, there is no evidence really that shows that it creates issues for your kidneys. Now, surprisingly, and Keon Aminos is not formulated for this, and I can't advise people to specifically use it for this. And you should, consult a doctor if you have kidney disease. But actually, when you have kidney disease, part of the issue is is excreting the urea and ammonia. And that is because the non-essential amino acids are converted into that, and it's taxing on your kidneys. And so actually a treatment that has been studied, and I have read about it, and it seems very interesting, is that by actually, because often if you have kidney disease, you can't then consume much protein because it's really hard on your body. By consuming only free-form essential amino acids, it stimulates muscle protein synthesis and reuses the non-essential amino acids that are already existing in your body in those proteins that were broken down, and reduces the effective load on the kidneys and how much urea and ammonia are created. So it's actually a great potential support and dietary solution for people with kidney disease.
Fascinating. We had Stuart Phillips on the show a while back. He's a protein researcher out of, I believe, McMaster University, I want to say, up in Canada. But he kind of like echoed a similar sentiment that when you have kidney disease and you're being really deliberate about the amount of protein that you're ingesting, then quality becomes even more important than it already is. And by concentrating the amino acids that you're consuming, you're and this isn't medical advice for anybody with kidney disease, but you're getting more bang for your buck. You're more optimally supporting muscle protein synthesis while simultaneously lightening the load on the kidneys. It's very interesting.
Because it's those non-essential amino acids that are being converted into urea and ammonia that's what's creating the problem.
Yeah.
So if you eat something with a bunch of those and not as much essential amino acids, or are very deficient in kind of a total essential amino acid complex, then it's going to be more taxing on you.
Got it.
That said, basic answer to the basic question, no, it doesn't. It's not anywhere tied to creating kidney problems if you don't already have any.
Got it. Yeah, that's been, I feel like, something that it comes up again and again. Usually it comes from, I think, the plant-based community, that eating too much protein is no bueno, but there's no evidence that I'm aware of, and I've looked, that high protein diets have any negative impact on the functioning of healthy kidneys.
Nor am I.
Yeah. So super important. Protein is super important. It's great for supporting muscle protein synthesis, preventing muscle protein breakdown. Do our needs change for protein as we age?
Yes. And the reason for that is that as we age, it starts at about the age 40. But it's different for different people and progressively deteriorates as we get older. And this is not applicable for all aging adults, but for most, sarcopenia becomes an issue. And that is basically the loss of muscle mass. And muscle mass is, I would say, the most important asset that we want to invest in physically in our body as we enter old age. And that's because muscle, as I said before, it's the reservoir of amino acids. It helps regulate and maintain cardiovascular health, the overall amino acids in your blood, and all your other organ function, metabolic health. And more than anything, I mean, how many stories do we have of someone getting old and falling and breaking their hip? And when you're in that kind of situation, one, you're going to be more likely to get injured, to fall, get hurt if you don't have muscle to help support your bones and your structure. But then also when you go through some type of injury like that, as we described earlier, like in that NASA study, you immediately start to lose more muscle mass. So your body can deteriorate really quickly due to injury as you get older. And the reason why muscle becomes more difficult to maintain and to build as we get older is because of a couple of things. One, our ability to digest the protein. Our body, I mean, I don't know for the exact reasons, but it's harder for our body to actually just digest the protein and get the amino acids out. And then on top of that, the ability for our body to receive the signaling messages from the leucine to stimulate the muscle protein synthesis and then to react to it becomes resistant. You become anabolically resistant.
Wow.
And thus you need to consume more protein to get the bang for the buck from what the initial protein is. Also in that case, something like essential amino acids, I think, become more helpful and more important the older that we get, because they are a main line to your blood and more directly stimulate that muscle protein synthesis at a lower dose. Because another issue as you get older, your metabolic health gets not as good. Right. And if you're trying to consume like tons of steak, you're consuming a lot of calories. And so it's much easier to consume a smaller amount of essential amino acids.
Fascinating. Yeah. And there's research showing that people over the age of 65 that eat more protein, they have increased longevity, reduced risk for cancer. So it definitely seems like like an antidote to the way we typically think about aging, the frail and immobile and disabled. So I'm on board with that.
It's not rocket science either. It's like, I mean, you think about kids get away with like eating candy and somehow have the energy to do stuff. I eat that candy. I feel like terrible, and as you get older, the importance of your health choices, you feel them more immediately. And, when you think about what's a healthy diet, I mean, it's It's good sources of protein and vegetables and fruits. And I mean, it's eating like a whole food, good, solid diet. And that involves a lot of protein.
Yeah.
And not also eating junk.
I think whey is such a great tool. And also it's probably something that humans have been making, not necessarily cognizant of its health benefits or its nutritional value, but humans have been probably making whey for centuries, because you produce whey. Isn't it a byproduct of cheese making?
It is a byproduct of cheese making. And so there's some kind of like hit on the whey industry that it was like, oh, it was just this thing that was like a byproduct, and then they figured out how to turn it into a supplement. But no, it really is like an amazing dietary supplement. Yeah, it's been made for centuries. It's had like many different uses. I'm not familiar with the complete history of whey, but yes, it's been used. It's been created for centuries. I want to say it's been used for like cosmetic. In the past, it used to be used for some kind of like a cosmetic, like face masks or something like that.
Wow. And there's also this interesting line of research showing that whey can support like immune function and all this. Yeah, there's a lot of like interesting little sort of tidbits out there in the literature. I take a whey supplement on a regular basis. I love Kion, whey protein, as I mentioned. It tastes great. I also appreciate that you guys have an unflavored version, because sometimes I'm just like not wanting something overly sweet. So yeah, I feel like people should definitely go and check out the stuff that you guys do. I know that you've been super generous. You've given the Genius Life listeners this incredible discount. They can save 20% on subscriptions, 10% on one-time purchases if they head over to getkion.com/geniuslife, which is, again, super generous. And you launched it with Ben Greenfield, right?
Yeah, that's right. The fitness guru himself.
Hey, if you like that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.
If we focus on pathology, we're chasing our tail. Because that's the example in medicine. In medicine, they always focus on pathology. But solution-based eating is really muscle-centric.